Part 7. Confrontations. Chapter 29. The Wise Approach. It is often said that it is not how you tackle life which is the important part, it is how you approach life in the first place. If you approach life open and honest, with your eyes and ears open and your mouth closed, you will not miss half of the view, and you may be able to appreciate the situation in all of its broader aspects. How you approach a situation also defines the situation and defines any problems which may arise. It is often we ourselves who set the tone and therefore the outcome of any given situation, so if we inject humour and lightness into any confrontation, that will be eased, and if we inject nervousness and angry messages, then that will be exasperated and the whole situation will become more difficult. The outer world will mirror our inner world. Have you ever heard the saying, monkey see, monkey do? This phrase highlights the fact that people will mirror our actions and they will ameen our approach. So if we approach with a smile, you will be greeted with a smile more often than not. If you approach cautiously and calmly with a whisper, then the people hearing that will reciprocate and mirror your actions. If you change your stance or your position around the table, your hand position or your legs perhaps, then people will subconsciously mirror that effect. So if you go into a situation like a bull in a china shop, then some people will be annoyed and some people will be affected by that, and they will mirror that stance. If you accuse someone and start raving and shouting and screaming the house down, then they will reciprocate and you will get back what you give out. If you don't want people to shout and bawl and scream in your face, it's easier just not bothering, just save yourself that effort and don't scream and shout and bawl in their face, and then that cuts down the odds of that happening. Of course, we can never make someone happy. We can never make someone who's determined to be miserable happy when the weight of the world appears to be on their shoulders, and in their world, the world is heavy and dark and miserable and they are not happy, independent of what you might think in your world. Sometimes making light of a situation might not be very helpful either. That's why being open and honest and amenable is the best policy. If you are flexible, then you may be able to bend to a situation and be more lenient with the situation, and if you are brittle and harsh, then you may become intolerant and intolerable in any given situation. So being flexible, open and amenable to a philosopher is probably the best way to go. Chapter 30. Resolving Problems. Problems are often a major problem in people's lives. Dealing with problems is often a big deal in itself. As we move through life, we will be faced with a number of tasks, and some of those tasks will be easier and some will be harder. Tasks are chores, certainly, but tasks can often be brushed out of the way pretty easily without much effort or intellectual degree to interpret those tasks, but problems are a whole different matter. Problems do require thought and feeling, and when faced with problems, you might feel disturbed by the fact that the problem has appeared, and disturbed by the fact that you can't necessarily see an end to those problems, or even an easy way to negotiate your way through them. Imagine a problem is a boulder in an asteroid field, and you are a spaceship flying through those asteroids. Those asteroids are flying towards you and you have to navigate around them as best as you can. To get over them, or to get beyond them, to get by them, to get around them at some point, and just to get through it in some way. There are many different ways you can approach the asteroid. You can chip away at that problem over days and weeks and eke that down so that the problem becomes smaller. You can avoid and swerve that problem by misdirection and passing that problem on to other people, or to sidestep that with a verbal negotiation whereby that problem isn't a situation anymore and it just disappears in a cloud of smoke. Sometimes problems are illusory and issues on the radar may never even appear. It is up to us to approach those things in a manner which is open and amenable, so those things can be handled with tender loving care. Some people like to deal with problems like rolling a ball down a bowling alley and crashing those balls against the pin. Some people like to deal with problems very deliberately, and sometimes that works, and sometimes that just makes the situation much worse. You can try and get through it the quick way by blasting that thing and seeing what survives at the end of it, but if you blow the situation up, you may just end up with lots of little problems, which makes the whole situation harder to handle. Often it isn't how we deal with a problem, it is how we take care of the problem. So, once again, handling the problem with tender loving care means there is less of a rush. Handling the problem makes sure the problem gets done first time, because don't forget, we are going through life for the first time and the last time every day, and we are going through problems in situations for the first time and the last time every day. The sooner it starts, the sooner it's over. So the sooner you tackle those problems, the sooner you can get on with getting that out of the way. It's very much like a student who writes a report paper and leaves that problem to the last moment. Of course, they have a massive hill to climb with very little time to go, and those problems seem insurmountable. Whereas if the student had have tackled that assignment much earlier and allowed much more time, then those problems would have been much easier to deal with. So sometimes leaving things till the last moment doesn't help. Deadlines are often a problem when dealing with problems, because sometimes the challenge is to deal with problems within a certain time limit. It's often a good step to think about those problems before you start, before heading on in there and trying to make sense of it all. And thinking is often the very first step to observe when approaching any situation, because thought can often save us going down the wrong route and starting on the wrong path to begin with. Going down the wrong path right from the beginning is certainly something to be avoided with little forethought, even if it means taking a break before you even start. Problems are only as big as they appear to be to us. They may appear very large to us and very small to other people, very significant to us but very minor to other people. So we cannot expect other people to be in our world and to see things as we do, so we certainly cannot expect people to appreciate our problems for the scale and the scope and the depth and the magnitude as we see them. We cannot rely on other people not only to appreciate our problems, but to be able to resolve our problems. And so other people sometimes are incapable of solving the problems that we need to solve for ourselves. It is a philosopher's role to decide which of those problems should be dealt with in which priority, and which should be delegated to other people, which problems you really need to do on your own, and which problems you really need help with. If you can ask for help, then that may be a problem solved or a problem halved. And if you cannot ask for help, then that is another problem in itself. All we can do is to make sure that we are not the problem, and that we are not creating problems for ourselves as we try to solve the problems we are faced with, and then if we can take ourselves out of the picture, we can make life just a little easier to negotiate. Chapter 31. Fights and Clashes. From time to time, people will encounter a huge problem, a massive planetoid boulder on our radar, and we cannot ever get rid of that problem. The more we think about the problem, the more we add to that, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it becomes a massive problem that becomes insurmountable and becomes a challenge. Challenges may take several years to develop or may conclude in an instant. A challenge may take a while to work out, and a challenge may have any number of problems contained within it. If your challenge was to build a Formula 1 racing car, then that challenge would have a mass of problems contained within it, and it would take a number of people to sort out all those individual problems to get the thing on the road. Any big challenge is a series of problems. Handling that challenge, once again, with tender loving care is much easier than being rough and aggressive with that challenge and to take that thing by the throat. Sometimes you have to be ruthless in business, and sometimes you have to be professional. This is often a challenge in itself when your business life is rather chaotic and you have deadlines to meet and you have customers who all need to be seen and handled with tender loving care. It doesn't mean that you have to be mean and horrible and nasty to get your way in business, and being that way is the easiest way to lose customers and to alienate people. Challenges are often a power struggle, and it is up to us how we deal with that power struggle. If there is no power struggle coming from our corner, then at least we only have to deal with whatever is appearing from other people. In that situation, the power struggle is best resolved by being decisive. If we appear soft during a power struggle, we may appear to come out weaker as the victim, as the other person may trample on our thoughts and our feelings. If we are too strong and too aggressive in a power struggle, then we may appear judgmental, arrogant and aggressive because we realise that we are the villain in that situation and the victim may look down upon us. Power struggles aren't always easy to avoid and they aren't always easy to spot. Sometimes a conversation will just fall into a power struggle of who's right, and you have to dive in there and either stand up for yourself or to be amenable and try and balance the situation so that life may progress. What happens when we are faced with these situations is up to us. The very first thing that we may do if a challenge is being spoken or issued in our direction will be the opportunity to speak and to say something to approach the situation, and sometimes this falls into the category of the first knee-jerk reaction. Sometimes the very first thing or the very first idea which pops into your head as a first knee-jerk reaction may not be the most productive thing to do and the most productive thing to say in that given situation. So sometimes holding on to the very first thing that you think of is the best approach, because sometimes blurting out the first knee-jerk reaction, handling that situation deliberately difficultly, will hinder your progress and will complicate the problem even further. Rather than jumping to conclusions or grabbing the wrong end of the stick, often it is best to wait and listen to the other person to hear them out before you communicate and deliver your verdict, because until you have the full facts, you are speaking out of ignorance, and if you are not allowing the other person to speak and have their thoughts aired on the table, you are hogging the limelight, and the other person will be frustrated in their efforts to communicate with you. In any kind of confrontation, to maintain silence and giving the other person space, allowing them some leeway over their thoughts and not jumping down their throat as soon as they say anything which doesn't conform to your ideals or your view of life, that makes the situation much easier to handle, and both parties should be able to look out for each other. One of the biggest challenges is to maintain a partnership with a partner who has become bored of the situation and wants to move on. The challenge may become highly heated and involve arrogance and lies being thrown around the room, and sometimes that intolerance can lead to a huge big upset which doesn't benefit anyone in the long run. It's certainly important to appreciate those challenges in life where you cannot seem to win, and when dealing with partners and other people who have their own issues and their own challenges in life, sometimes you cannot win and sometimes you cannot help those people. Sometimes the best way to help those people is to leave them alone and to let them deal with their own problems. Sometimes it is helpful to suggest time and space on your own or away from the other person to help think about those problems instead of things turning into a showdown, and certainly a showdown confrontation is something to be avoided. Ultimately, all partnership problems have to be an agreement and a negotiation. That agreement and negotiation might be fair or foul depending on the people that you are dealing with. Everybody can approach the situation arrogantly and unfairly and to cast accusations and to throw insults at other people. Everyone is completely capable of doing that and falling into that kind of behaviour if they are not aware of how they are being. As a philosopher, knowing how they are being, you can sidestep that and you can play that as a game. You can avoid that by saying, I will not be mean, I will not be arrogant, I will deal with this in a nice, calm, sensible manner, and you will not catch me out, and you will not make me arrogant and lie and exaggerate, because you don't have to follow their way. In fact, you don't have to follow anybody's way. You can just be open to the fact that they have a problem, and they are having a major problem, talking about that problem and expressing that problem in a way that makes sense. And you may find that they have a problem which isn't the thing that they are actually talking about and the thing which they are laying on the table. Any kind of partnership can turn into a real big deal when one partner doesn't quite know what they want and doesn't quite know how to get it. Chapter 32. Confrontational Partnerships. It can be very difficult in life if one partner takes the other one for granted. They know something is wrong, but they don't know quite what it is, and all of a sudden their beautiful partner and maybe their beautiful children may not look so beautiful anymore, and the partner doesn't know why. For some reason, all that they have isn't quite what they wanted in life. That isn't quite the path that they envisioned their life to be. That isn't quite the person that they imagined themselves to be, and that isn't quite the situation that they really wanted. Is there something better? Is there something new? Well, the grass is always greener, and there is always something over the horizon. Maybe that thing will be better than the situation you already have, and sometimes it will be not so good and worse than the situation they already have. There is no telling what lies over the horizon, but for some people, whatever they have right now isn't quite good enough. Sometimes a partnership will degrade after 3 or 4 years when the novelty value has worn off and everything seems very over-familiar. Seeing the same thing day after day, facing the same thing day after day, interviewing the same person perhaps may lead to melancholy behaviour. In that role, that person wallows in the sense of not knowing their life and who they are and where they are going. If one partner is constantly trying to make things work and the other partner is constantly trying to brush that off, then something has got to give. One partner may think the other one will change and grow out of that phase on their own. Sometimes they do, but in most cases they don't. They just go on being who they are being, cold and lonely and unreachable, and before you know it, a partnership leads to a breakup. Before that happens, it is important to interview that partner and try to get to the root cause of whatever is the problem. By saying, I feel there is something deeper here, there is a bigger question, you can probe those people without being annoying and deliberately patronising to them, and you can help them realise and understand. Because sometimes half of the battle is to help your partner to realise aspects which they have not appreciated before, and having realised them, your partner will be then more amenable to recovering that situation and to resolving that situation amicably. If you inform the other person of the full facts, and if you tell them the full story just as it was and without any exaggeration, then they will be on a level playing field with you and the arrogance should drop. If they refuse to believe your side of the story because they believe they have facts to prove otherwise, then all you can do is to state your side of the case very clearly and to say, don't listen to Chinese whispers because that is not the truth, this is the real truth, and do not lie under that situation. If you, for whatever reason, need to get out of a situation, then telling the truth is always the best measure, because even if that truth is disloyal to someone else and disloyal to a company or a project or a challenge, then always, at least by telling the truth, you are admitting that there is a problem and that problem can be resolved, whereas if you lie and exaggerate, you're actually denying the problem or putting that problem or that blame onto something else. That just makes the situation unclear. A clear situation is one where everybody understands each other and all the full facts are on the table. That makes the problem tolerable and solvable, and just like the Krypton factor, you can put those things together and assemble those into a working operation. Sometimes when dealing with problems and challenges particularly, you may be under severe harassment and even threat. So what should you do under those situations? Well, be strong. The strength must come from your inner being, which knows you will survive this situation, you will live through it, come what may. It started, so it's inevitable that at some point in your life it will be over. The whole point of this situation is to work out what you want to do for the best. There is always a way out, an exit from any situation, but the brave thing to do is actually the thing which will often resolve that situation, and that is to tackle that and to speak to those people. Being strong in those situations, we have to speak to sometimes highly ignorant people about a situation which they are loath to even bear interest about. It is a chore and it is a headache, and you feel under extreme stress having to do that. Being strong isn't necessarily being hard. You can deal with a situation too harshly and that will just crumble in your fingers. Just like the asteroid, that will crumble down and it will disintegrate into nothing, but that is often not the best outcome when you really wanted something from that situation. In the middle of the asteroid there is a pearl, a diamond, a bar of gold, and that is the knowledge that you've gained from that experience, which ultimately leads on to wisdom. If you fail to find the experience and the situation crumbles in your fingers, then it degrades into chaos and you are back to being in a chaotic world where anything can happen. Treating things lightly and with care maintains the integrity of that situation, which means that thing is held together so that that can be handled in a manner which resolves that situation while it's still there on the table. Sometimes it is best to maintain tolerance, and sometimes arrogance cannot be resolved because, as I say, those arrogant people are in their arrogant world, and sometimes pointing out those arrogances and those touches which you find annoying just makes them more arrogant and puts the blame back on you. Tolerance isn't easy under these situations, and it might involve biting your lip, but please don't put on masks and put on a brave face in those situations. If you are unhappy, then make sure that you project that onto your face and make sure that your next question is, I am feeling unhappy about this situation. I feel a bit terrible about this situation. I don't know why. Can you help me clear that up? And that will open the door to communication. Power struggles sometimes lead into telling lies, and dealing with lies is certainly a hard thing to tolerate, and it's certainly something which is a confrontation to us all, because we cannot change the person's attitude if they are telling a lie and they are sticking to that lie no matter what. In that situation, you may find that people aren't listening to you, and how do you deal with someone who refuses to listen to your point of view? The very last thing you should do is to point out your point of view exactly as stated and going over that time and time again, saying, no, you didn't listen to me, let me just state that all over again. The bare minimum that you should do is to rephrase whatever you've just said into another frame, another category, so that the person appreciates where you are coming from. Bear in mind also that the response you get from a person may not be directly the answer that you really wanted, and the response may simply be another question which you have to deal with, and you may think that the person has not listened to you and has not taken on board what you've just said. 9 times out of 10, the person will have listened to you, and people cannot help listening to other people because you cannot literally close your ears. It will have gone in there consciously or subconsciously, so you will have been listened to. The point is, you have not been understood to the point where you can deliver the message. So change your translation and change your tone and change your attitude so that you can deliver that message that you really want to be understood, and clarify the message so that they can deliver the response with clarity back to you. If they misunderstand your intentions, then that leads to miscommunication. If things break down, don't take them and turn them into a huge great big boulder which you then have to get over and break down and get around. Don't turn those issues into an obstacle. Simply place those issues on the table and realize that really isn't an issue for you unless you really turn that into something huge. Being tolerant in the first place is the best way to deal with confrontations. If you try to fight the situation, then that may lead to anger and provocation. Sometimes provoking a situation comes easy to other people, and being provoked may lead you into a state of anger and rage. and sometimes people will provoke you into that situation, whether you like it or not, and however much you are observant of yourself, you may find you are rising to the situation and becoming angry, and then, well, anger is blind. Sometimes you say and do things in anger mode which is not true to yourself. So sometimes you say and do things in the spur of the moment which are rash, and a knee-jerk reaction in that situation can be a fatal mistake, because sometimes you just find yourself creating more and more problems for yourself. Don't create more problems for yourself. You have enough to deal with the other person creating problems. So if you can take those problems from your side of the table, you may find the situation is easier by at least 50%. You may realize that other people's problems are not your own problems, and sometimes other people think about problems which don't actually exist in the real world, just potential problems that may exist within their minds. Don't take those on board as your problems, and don't take those on board as a personal attack, otherwise you may be dismayed. Instead, try to reassure the other person that their problems have been listened to, that they are actually good enough, even though they may not consider themselves good enough, and that their life is perfectly workable in some measure, because the more we can reassure ourselves and other people that we are good enough, perfectly adequate in life, and perfectly alright to be whoever we are being, then that should settle fears, and reassurance paves way to appreciation. I think everyone appreciates a little reassurance. Chapter 33. Where am I in all this? Another of our life's daily challenges is to work out where we are in life. I don't just mean in the physical form, as in where we are geographically, I mean where we are in the state of our lives, from what we wanted versus what we have. Certainly with businesses and partners and children and income worries and cars and holidays to think about, you may wonder, where am I in all this? And sometimes when family gets on top of each other, and partnerships and siblings get on top of each other and take our priorities away from us and from what we want, and then when we have to sacrifice our lives in order to maintain those careers and the raising of those children, we may have to step back and to consider, where am I in all this? If this means where am I along my life's path, well, you are exactly where you are. You are exactly where you are meant to be right now. No matter how fast you move into the future, you are still there right now, and no matter how slowly you try to move into the future, you are still there where you are exactly meant to be. Because each one of us grows, and each one of us experiences life day after day, and these challenges of personal development that we face are simply there to reassure us that we are actually learning day to day to day. The problem comes when we are unappreciated. You may realize that you have autonomy in life. You can run around and do things at your leisure. But if you are under a boss or a partner or a child who doesn't have that impression of your life and wants to run your life their way, then that leads to stress, and it can lead to a confrontation. Dominance from a partner or from children or from bosses in any context, even from your own mother and father, any type of dominance in your life will make you wonder where you are in life and where you are in their eyes compared to where you should be in their eyes, and the strength to tolerate that and to not turn that into a problem is difficult to withstand sometimes. But remember, the only person that can change you is you. They can talk to you until they're blue in the face, but all those people who think they have pressure and dominance over you actually have absolutely nothing at all. For those who think they still have to get somewhere to get anywhere in life, in actuality, wherever you are is just where you are, and you are not actually moving an inch. Even if you are travelling right now at high speed on a motorway, a plane or a train, your world environment may move at high speed, but inside you, things don't actually move an inch. This may lead us to believe that we are actually the centre of our own universe, but that is actually an illusion. There's nothing wrong in taking that on as your reality, and in the Western world, often people are encouraged to be like that from day one. A philosopher, on the other hand, may place themselves on the very edges of society, and to them the world revolves on its own, and they move along with the ebb and flow along with it. If we should return to our space analogy, imagine you are a spaceship flying through the cosmos. All around you right now are boulders and asteroids, planets and comets, all the space debris that was left over from a huge Big Bang, which caused everything to exist. Everything in space was caused by something, and we call this causality. Causality is the result of everything which has happened up to this point, and causality also takes those happenings on to the next point. The result is just stuff, and as we shall see in the next part, stuff is nothing to be feared, stuff is just a collection of stuff. In the case of the cosmos, we did not create that stuff, but we inhabit a world within that stuff. We can fly around that stuff, and we can orbit planets and asteroids and comets within that, and yet it is not part of us. In fact, even the spaceship in which we find ourselves flying in was not created by us, it was created by someone else. So we are not the centre of our universe, we are just flying within the universe, and we are part of it. Causality means that that stuff exists, and what we make of that stuff is up to us. Because consciousness and language and relativity in our minds all distort what we see and act like a mirror to actuality. So sometimes we have to get really close to something to really see what it is and to really understand how it moves. The problem arises when we take that causality, all that stuff which has existed, which is beyond our control and is certainly not our fault. The problem comes when we try to identify those things, and that turns into what philosophers call duality. Because in duality, there is your view of the object, there is the other object's view of that object, and never the twain shall meet. This duality between subject and object often leads us to try to put things into little tiny boxes, and the things that we have seen before are often misidentified as the same things again. So that's how we often judge a book by its cover, and that's how we sometimes fall into the same problems again and again. All this isn't helped by the fact that there really are no destinations. Everything you encounter is merely a milestone on the same journey. The where am I in all this often means that we reflect upon our journey, and we may become dismayed or unsatisfied on the progress we have made so far, particularly in light of other people on the planet telling us in order to get a life, we must get a child and a partner and a house and a job and everything that goes along with those. The problem is that as soon as you have yourself a child, you'll find a barrel load of problems, and the same with a partner, the same with a job, and basically the same with everything that people thought was your best interest to acquire. Gaining any measure of those things, as we have seen, isn't always a measure of success, and acquiring those things may just actually make you feel more depressed than ever. We are each at least 50% responsible for everything which occurs and happens in our lives, and so we are at least 50% responsible for those things that we have in our lives. If we take care of things, they will tend to hang around, and if we take advantage of things and abuse things, they will tend to fade away. The trick is to put a strong wish out there for what we really do want, and I strongly believe if you should try hard enough and put in as much effort as possible and really wish hard enough, then it is possible to gain anything that you should desire. At the end of the day, we can choose, but it isn't always choosing what you have in life which is the most important thing, but accepting what you have in life, all that you have and all that you have not got. If you can accept what you have, then that gives us the reassurance that we are in fact where we are meant to be, and that we are actually good people, and we are making our way in life. Sometimes we have to choose the hard way to gain the results that we desire, even if that means cutting your losses and walking away. Chapter 34. Knowing when to walk away. It is important in any kind of relationship to know the point at which you will walk away, because your time is valuable, your energy is valuable, and once your time has been spent in the place that you are, then it's time to move on. At that point, you must gather all your worldly objects and move to the next point in readiness for whatever may lie ahead. As President Kennedy once said, sometimes we must do things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard, in order to get to where we need to go. You can always walk away from any situation, as long as you have checked and double-checked that that is the best thing to do. There is certainly a time for leaving someone's space, but if you find yourself deliberately running away from any situation, even if it's a harsh situation, without having dealt with it first, then you will find those situations will follow you wherever you go. If you are being harassed by someone and you find that you have to move away from that area to save yourself from being harassed, then you may find yourself in fear of that situation occurring again. If you tackle that situation person to person and that situation then dissolves, then you'll feel more confident in yourself. But again, before you abandon any event, any idea, any concept, any situation, it's always best to make sure to check and double check that that is the right thing to do, because there is no point wasting your time and energy running back and correcting things when your time could be better spent somewhere else. So stepping away just at the right time to cut your losses can shine so much light on a problem, it can illuminate the situation. This isn't so much running away as walking away, and as any schoolboy bully will tell you, walking away after a confrontation is a much better way to end the deal.